Hi guys, so I got a request to go through my skill build and build guide for the Shadow Imbuement Rogue that's using concealment in place of an auto attack. So starting with the skill tree, basically you want 2 points in any auto attack, doesn't matter which one you want. I've got puncture here just because I was using puncture originally, so we spec the point out here. Max twisting blades, siphoning strikes for the heal, shadow step up into the stun, dash, crit, and the slow. The slow is important for some damage reduction nodes on our Paragon tree when we go through that. Max concussive for the crit chance against knockdown, and trick attacks to knock down dazed enemies, and we'll go through that. Of course, max weapon mastery, 1 point any concealment, 40 energy when we cast, and 6-second vulnerable with the skill that breaks concealment, which is generally twisting blades. I've only got 1 point in exploit because we're a little bit point starved, but you can get some points later on down in the tree if you find you don't need haste to pop into here. I find the build does so much damage, we don't really need the extra here, but feel free to take it here if you want. 1 point in the Shadow Imbuement, I've got +5 here because of my helm, and up into the vulnerable spread. Max out consuming shadows for the energy regen, just 1 into Shadow Crash. I've got 3 points here in the Fidget Finesse because of the Pentanent boots, so probably the only unique that's mandatory for the build. We go into Shadow Clone, maxed out Innovation for the energy regen, 2 points into Aftermath, so when we cast Shadow Clone we basically fill our energy bar, Adrenaline Rush and Haste. So these modes down here are basically for the movement speed, so if you want to free up 4 points, max out Exploit, max out Aftermath, you certainly can. And key passives, Momentum, basically for the damage reduction, energy regen and movement speed, it's by far the best for this build. Running through the Paragon tree, I'll have a full build guide down below, but basically the main points of note, put closer into our main tree, and you can see we've only taken 40 points here because it's additive damage rather than multiplicative, so I just do enough to get the 10% damage reduction. Then we come up into No Witness. This buffs up a good 70% of the time in most dungeons, and anything that's dense, this is up 100% of the time, so it's a massive DPS buff. In here, we take combat, just because it's got a lot of intelligence nodes and critical strike damage being a core multiplier. You want to take as much intelligence as you can. The critically strikes giving energy back is crucial for the build as well, helps with some of the energy management. Coming over next, we've got Cheap Shot. Now with Pentanent boots, everything is crowd controlled, so this 25% is basically up all the time. In the glyph, we've got control for the added damage to crowd controlled and the 10% increase for anything that's chilled. Now we do have some stun with Shadow Step and Shadow Crash, giving us some stuns on shadow damage. So the 10%'s up virtually all the time, and some conditional 20%. It's also good if you're on with a wizard that's running a freeze build, that 20% kicks in a lot as well. Main points of note, so you've got 12% damage reduction along with some additional damage reduction from slowed. So again, this helps with survivability. I've taken damage reduction from elites over here just to help with some of the survivability. I did take points out of exploit weakness, so I was running this before, but found I didn't need the extra damage, and this extra 13% damage reduction from elites certainly does help, gives us a little bit of armor as well. So exploit weakness is the next board. We put diminish into here to buff the rare node, which is extra vulnerable damage. Now vulnerable damage is probably the most overpowered damage stat in the game, given its multiplier. And you'll see on my stats later how high I've actually stacked this. At some point I think it'll get nerfed, but while it's there, you want to have diminish in here to basically buff the vulnerable damage. I don't take this rare node over here. I don't think the potion healing in the dex is worth the points, which has certainly helped us get this additional damage reduction down here. Next, we go into Cunning Stratagem, basically to get the extra survivability and some extra damage out of the rare nodes. Exploit Glyph. So again, we've maxed this out in terms of the strength on the board to maximize the vulnerable damage that we're getting from the glyph. So this is mandatory in all the builds. So if you haven't got this to level 15, definitely get this up first. And lastly, we go Tricks of the Trade, basically from additional armor, and you can see I've unlocked the additional bonus here with the additional strength I've got on the build. Eventually I will try and hit this, but I'm only using this at the moment to try and min-max. I don't quite have enough points to get intelligence. When I do, I'll be speccing out of some of the strength to even this out. They're running through the gear, so very high armor, and that's just due to some armor rolls on gear. You want to try and get this as high as you can, along with damage reduction. So helm, life, total armor, cooldown reduction, mandatory. Plus ranks to shadow imbuement helps with some of the AoE clear. You can also get dexterity in things like that to unlock some of the rare nodes on your board. So that flex spot is up to you. I run disobedience on here for the additional armor, which certainly helps with the survivability. Chest. This is a perfect role for the build. Armor, life, DR to close, flat DR. I run Quickening Fog for the smoke grenade on dash, so when we engage, leaves a little smoke grenade when we finish, stuns everything for 4 seconds, allows you to get all your DPS off. So it's very good for engaging, to apply some daze, and then we start knocking things down. Gloves, mandatory rolls here, Twisting Blades ranks, critical strike chance. I also like running attack speed, just helps with getting the DPS out on your Twisting Blades quicker. Laugh Sight, I've got Lucky Hit chance to slow, just to apply that extra damage reduction quicker if Dash hasn't hit the mob. You can also run Lucky Hit chance as well, Dex, Intelligence, Strength to unlock nodes. So that Lucky Hit chance to slow is a flex roll. You can adjust that to how your build functions. Pants, again, perfect rolls on here. Life, DR to close, DR, total armor. We take Cheats aspect here for the extra damage reduction against crowd control. Now with Penitent Boots, you can see this little blue, this blue trail behind me. This crowd controls everything, so we're always getting this 25% damage reduction. So it's really strong. Penitent Greaves, these are mandatory for the build. The build doesn't function without this. It's a damage buff, but it also procs our Umbral Ring to give our energy back, and everything's crowd controlled as soon as we jump into the pack. So these are the only unique that's mandatory for the build. Now they're fairly common, so it shouldn't take you too long to grind them out. Once you have them, it's a huge quality of life to the build. If you don't have this, I would run the extra charge on Shadow Step, just to get an extra set of Unstoppable, but we've got 3 Unstoppables in the build, so I don't find it's necessary. But you can run it if you want. Otherwise, you can get the movement speed once you get Unstoppable for 4 seconds. That's also a good speed boost to the build. Bow, so we've got Twisting Blades in here, mandatory. Now I've been doing some testing in terms of stat allocations on here. Once you hit around level 90, you have enough additive stats in your stat tree from crowd control, chilled, frozen, close, core, things like that, to where all stats actually outweighs it. So all stats gives you dexterity, strength, intelligence, which helps with critical strike chance, helps with energy regen and armor, but it also helps a little bit on willpower for the healing received. So you also get a little bit of healing back here as well, and it helps you reach some of those higher nodes on the Paragon tree. So I've got this exact roll on both of my swords as well. So running through the swords, accelerating for the attack speed, again, just helps with pumping out the DPS. I run Synergy on the second sword, which helps with cooldown resetting on Concealment, just to have higher uptime. So you can swap this out for another offensive aspect if you like. When I was running Temerity, I did have Conceited in here for the damage while you have a barrier. So you can play around with a couple of options here. Umbral, mandatory for the build. It's basically how we get all our energy back as quick as we do. I take Crit Strike, Max Life, Energy Regen as the mandatory rolls, and then each of my rings, they either have Crit Strike damage or vulnerable damage. Either one of them is good. So just pick whichever sort of comes with it, but ideally you want Crit Strike chance, energy resource generation to generate your energy, and maximum life to help with survivability. And then the last slot is flex, whether Crit Strike damage or vulnerable. The other ring, so I've got vulnerable damage on this one. Vengeful for the extra crit. Everything's vulnerable, so this 9% crit chance is up all the time. And on our neck, we run Edge Masters. Mandatory ones on this: move speed, cooldown, energy cost reduction. What the energy cost reduction does is it reduces Twisting Blades down to 25, so you can get 4 off an entire energy globe. When we pop Concealment, the extra energy regen kicks in, basically fills the bar, so you get an extra 4, and then you get 50, which again fills up with all the extra energy resource generation we have as well, so you get a full buff. So you almost have 3 sets of Twisting Blades, which is enough to get your energy back with all the procs that we have going on. In terms of stats, just running through, so you can see my base critical strike is nearly 43%. So with Vengeful, this is up at 51%, so it's massive. 275 crit damage, 407 vulnerable, running through the additives. Crowd control is the main one. We've got a little bit of close, a little bit of core, cutthroat from our gems. Between these, all of these damage buffs, we have about 500% additive. I find adding extra really doesn't help the build, and the extra dexterity we get from all stats, buffing our dexterity, giving us skill damage, certainly helps. In terms of defenses, you want to aim for really high all damage, elite damage, damage reduction from vulnerable, damage reduction from close. It doesn't show the damage reduction from slow on here because it's conditional on our Paragon board, but it is there as well. In terms of utility, energy cost reduction, energy regen very high, which is further buffed by our strength as well, so this doesn't show up in the board. Movement speed, when we pop concealment, we're virtually at 200% cap. So that's why you see me running around so quick. High cooldown reduction, and the lucky hit slow. So that's the build, guys. Like I said, I'll have the build guide in the description below. Any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks.